pray for us, and then we'll jump in, right? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this class. Thank you again for bringing us here and allowing us to study your word and just to come and to know you more. And so I pray that you give us wisdom and insight, fill us with your spirit now as we learn the basics of biblical Greek. Give us discernment, understanding, and again, a greater love for your word. And so bless our time now. We pray this in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen. All right, guys. So as you guys remember from last week, we did a big review, and hopefully that was helpful and beneficial, just going through all of the cases and the meaning of all the cases. How did you guys do just with memorizing your charts, memorizing vocab, going back to it? Was that helpful for you guys, having kind of a week break of reviewing everything? Good?
It was better, but I still don't have it all down.
Okay, yeah.
But it's much better.
Much better, okay. And that's fine, even if you don't have it all down, it's a continual process of just learning, understanding, getting familiar with that chart. Even if you have it memorized, it's not going to be second nature to you. You're going to still struggle trying to look at a word and, okay, this is that ending. This is that case ending. What is it? You're going to have some struggle in the beginning. So don't be discouraged, guys. I know it's a lot. I know it's still pretty overwhelming. But we are going to try to move along and work through it as we go. So today what we're going to do is we're going to study prepositions and also Eimi, which is just the verb to be. Okay, so we're going to start verbs. We're not going to do a full introduction to verbs. We'll get to that later. But we just want to focus on Eimi and just get you guys started on understanding verbs, what they mean, how they function in a sentence. But we're going to start with prepositions. So if you guys have your notes out, this is chapter 8 in Mounts. And again, all of my notes are it's Mounts pulled out in a more condensed form, something easier for you guys to see and understand. But prepositions, let's start with the use of prepositions. Okay, so what is a preposition? What are we talking about here when we're talking about prepositions? Well, a preposition is simply a word that shows a relationship between two words. Okay, a word that shows a relationship between two words. I have an example here, and this is from Mounts. Quote, the book is under the table. Okay, so very basic sentence, and you guys know here, you have two nouns, right? You have the book, and you have the table, and the preposition under is showing you some kind of relationship between these two words. And it's basically telling you, okay, where is the book in relation to the table? Well, it's under the table. Okay, so Mount says, quote, it's been said that a preposition is anything a rabbit can do with its home. So you can go in it, you can go around it, you can dig under it, you can go through it. All of those words, those are prepositions, right? All of these relationships between these two nouns, between these two words. Now, as you guys can see, a preposition is always followed by another word, and we call that the object of the preposition. So again, in the sentence, the book is under the table. I have that object underlined. The object is the table. Okay, that's the object of the preposition. I have a Greek example here. Hoi aploi eparuthesan pros ton iesun. And if you guys can see there, I've underlined that object of the preposition. The preposition there is pros, okay, which means to or towards. And the object of the preposition is, in this case, it's ton iesun. And here the translation would be the crowds traveled, and they traveled where? Where did they travel? They traveled towards or to Jesus. Okay. And then finally, the preposition along with the object is called a prepositional phrase. So when we're looking at that whole part right there, the preposition and that object, that whole part of the sentence is called a prepositional phrase. So pretty standard. This is just standard grammar, standard English here. But now taking this to Greek, this is where things get a little different. This is where things might be a little tricky for you guys, and you have to pay attention. So those are prepositions in English, but in Greek, a preposition is going to derive its meaning from the case of the object. Okay, from the case of the object. So again, we've talked about all the cases, right? There's 4 cases in Greek: the nominative, the accusative, the genitive, and the dative. Each of those cases, when you see those case endings in a sentence, it's all talking about a different function in the sentence. Now, when it comes to prepositions, you're going to have a preposition, and you're going to have the object of a preposition, which is going to be in one of those cases, in one of those 4 cases. And those cases, those will determine the meaning of that preposition. Okay, so just to give you an example here, in your notes, meta to Iesu. Okay, so note the preposition is meta, right? And you have that object of the preposition, which is to Iesu, which is simply Jesus. And note the case. What is the case of to Iesu? Anyone? What's that omicron, upsilon case ending? What does that refer to? Anyone? And I know it's there in your notes, but without looking. Anyone? Want to try it? You guys know this. You guys got it. Omicron, upsilon.
Okay, it's singular.
Let's start with the case.
Okay,
You know
it's
what the case is?
Okay, wait. It's genitive?
Genitive, yeah, there you go. It's a genitive.
That was
Genitive case. So you guys remember, again, we're referring to that chart. So again, when you see that case ending, you can go to your chart, and if you can look at that that genitive singular column, it's going to be genitive singular, or also it could be, what else is exactly the same as the masculine form? It could also be a neuter. It could be a neuter word. So it could be genitive singular masculine, or it could be genitive singular neuter. But in this case, this would be a masculine word because it's referring to Jesus, Jesus, right? So this would be a genitive singular masculine word, yes?
So will the article and the noun that it follows and the preposition all agree, all have the same case, or no?
Yes, but a preposition, as you guys are going to see, a preposition there's no inflection with a preposition. A preposition is just going to be a preposition. Yeah.
But it will indicate, it will still be the same, right? Same case, no?
Okay, so I think I know what you're saying. Not necessarily.
Okay, that's
So this is where we'll get to that chart on the next page, on page 2, with significant prepositions. You can glance there right now, just to answer your question. So if you notice, let's look at dia. If you look at dia, the preposition dia, okay, so you have dia, which is a preposition, and it's going to take a object, right, which is a noun, and that's going to have a case. And the case can be either, if you look at the case of the object there, what 2 cases are there under dia?
genitive and accusative.
Genitive or accusative. Okay, so it could take either of those cases, and when it takes one of those cases, it's going to mean something different. So in this example for dia plus the genitive would mean through, or dia with the accusative, that would mean on account of. So if you guys notice, again, this is very different than in English, right? In English, you can have a preposition, and it's going to mean the same thing in all cases, but in Greek, it's going to mean different things. So again, you have dia, okay, plus genitive, all right? And again, that's going to mean, right, dia plus the genitive is going to mean through, okay? This will mean through. This means through, okay? But dia plus the accusative, what is that going to mean? Again, to repeat.
On account of.
On account of, all right? So, same preposition, but notice 2 different meanings. So, plus the accusative, we would say on account of, okay? Equals that. And it's going to be the same with all of these prepositions.
It's just these prepositions, that's it.
Well, we're just learning these right now. So I believe, Mount says there's 7 here, 7 new ones that you're learning in this chapter. There's more prepositions than this, but these are some of the significant ones that you want to memorize now, okay? So again, a preposition derives its meaning from the case of its object. So we just got to repeat this over and over. So here in that example of meta to iesu, again, preposition is meta, object of preposition is to iesu, and you can see that's in the genitive case. And if you look at your chart with all the significant prepositions, meta with the genitive would mean with. Okay, it would mean with. But if meta is with the accusative, what would it mean? It would mean after. Okay, it would mean something totally different than if it were in the genitive case. So how should you learn your prepositions? How should you memorize your prepositions? You should memorize your prepositions like this. I have that example there in your notes. Memorize the preposition with the case, and that means whatever it means. And so I have an example here. En with the dative means in. And you're going to memorize all of your prepositions like this because all of them are going to take an object with a certain case, and each of those cases are going to tell you something different about the meaning of the preposition.
So instead of like lineating this whole thing, it kind of actually makes it a little more complicated.
It makes it more complicated, yes.
Okay.
So normally, like in English,
Yeah.
under means under.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't have to worry about, you see the word, you see under, you see that preposition. It means the same thing. Again, context might change the meaning of some certain prepositions, but nothing grammatically in the sentence structure in English will tell you that's a different meaning. But in Greek, it's very precise. Right? There's different meanings with different cases. Okay, so a preposition derives its meaning from the case of its object. So again, I know you guys are already confused with a lot of things, and now to confuse you even more, prepositions get their meaning from its case. So we're going to learn prepositions this way. Again, en with the dative means in. Ace plus the accusative means into, in, or among. Okay, and you can just go down the list, and you can see how all the prepositions, again, they mean different things when they take different cases in those objects. All right.
So do we have a chart to memorize? Do we memorize?
Yeah, you can memorize this. So again, this is it's this chart. I just pulled this from Mounce. So Mounce has in his vocab section, he lists out those prepositions. I just like this way so you can see exactly what's going on, right? Preposition. We'll talk about elision in a bit, but you have elision, and then you have the case of the object, and then the meaning of the word. So just memorize this. These are the, I think there was 2 previous prepositions that you guys already memorized, which was ace and en, and then you're going to memorize 7 more. And really, it's more than 7 because each preposition, if it has more than one case, it's going to have a different meaning. Okay. So if you have a note card, I think the best way is actually separating. For example, dia has 2 different cases. You would have 2 note cards if you're trying to memorize these prepositions, right? You'd have one which says dia plus the genitive, and another which is dia plus the accusative. Does that make sense? All right. So some additional notes on prepositions. Number 1, prepositions are not inflected, which means they don't change their form. So that's a helpful thing. Again, the preposition itself is going to remain the same. What will change is the case of the object that's following that preposition. Okay. The only time you see the actual preposition change its form is when they're followed by a vowel. You don't have to even memorize this or note this, just know what happens when the word is followed by another word with a vowel. Look at what happens in this example with meta. So you have meta, and it's very simple, but it's just going to drop that last vowel. And so you can see it in your notes. So you have meta. And meta, if a word follows it, which begins with a vowel, it's going to drop that last alpha. So you can see it there, and it's just going to become met, like that. All right? So it looks the same, you just have this alpha dropped off, okay, if it's followed by a word with a vowel. And then finally, one more note is when you see a preposition, don't translate the key word normally associated with the genitive or the dative cases. And so normally, again, with the genitive or the dative, right, we have those key words. The genitive, you translate that with what the key word in English? Of. And then the key word in the dative is what? To, okay? Or in or with. But here, when you have a prepositional phrase or preposition, you're not going to insert that keyword. Okay, so you have an example here, halagos to deo, and that means the word to or towards God. And again, that's the word with the dative, right? You translate, you put in to or towards, right? To God. But when you add in that preposition, it's not going to be the word. Notice halagas sun to deo. That's not going to be the word with to God. It's simply the word, and it just takes on the meaning of that preposition, which is with, the word with God. All right, does that make sense? Okay. And again, you guys can see all of those significant prepositions there, and this is to be memorized. You're going to memorize these prepositions, and this is, it's just vocab. It's more vocab. It's more things to memorize. And again, Mounts puts this as vocab in your notes. Okay. So turning to page number 3, we're going to look at some examples. And try not to look at the right side as I maybe ask you guys some questions. So the first one is erkatai, which simply means he, she, it comes. Ace, oikon. Right? So what's the preposition here in this sentence? Anyone? Ace. Okay, ace. And then what will be the object of the preposition? Oikon. Okay? And now what's the case of oikon? Does anyone know the case? You see that case ending? New, you guys remember this?
It's accusative, right?
Like it would be accusative, yes, exactly. It would be accusative. Okay. So ace plus the accusative, looking at your chart on the previous page. Ace plus the accusative means what? Into, in, or among. Okay, and again, how we're going to decide between those is just context.
Oh, okay.
Whatever fits best as you're looking at a sentence, context will determine the meaning. And so here in this case, he or she or it comes into, is probably the best translation here, into a home. And that's what the prepositional phrase means. The next example is exelthen, ex autu, and the preposition here is ace. The object of the, I think I copied this, so this is incorrect, it's autu would be the object of preposition, so you cross that out. And autu, the case would be genitive, so here you would have ex autu, and that would mean, if you guys look at go back to significant prepositions, page 2, the preposition would be ek, okay, and plus the genitive either means from or out of, and so here it would simply mean that he came out of him, or he came out of him.
So the phrase is ek autu.
Yes, ek autu. And then we have one more example here. Doksan para anthropon u lambano. And here the preposition, anyone know what the preposition is here?
From?
Para, alright. And then the object of the preposition? Anthropon, alright. And what's the case of anthropon? You guys remember this? We have a new here, so. What could this be? Genitive. It could be a genitive, okay? Genitive plural, alright? Okay. And for this could be what gender? You guys know?
Masculine, yes.
Okay. Well, anthropos would be masculine. Okay. In this case, it would be masculine. But normally, right, when you have that omega nu, it can be any gender, right? It can be any gender here. Okay. So you have that prepositional phrase, right? I receive glory from. And again, I'm sorry, guys. This would be from men because this would be plural. It would be from men. So if you could just correct that in your notes.
From men?
Yeah, from men. Okay, glory from men. All right. Yeah, sorry for the typos or just incorrect data. All right, so we could turn to page number 4, and we have some exercises. All right, so page number 4. And I'll give you guys just a few minutes. Why don't we just do this first before we get to Eimi? We'll just focus on prepositions. So why don't we spend about 10 minutes or so going through these exercises. And again, just pull out the preposition, just fill in the chart on the right. And you don't have to do all the parsing if there's other words that need to be parsed. Just pull out the preposition, pull out the case, and then you can write out the meaning of those prepositions. All right, so let's run through Eimi. And for now, all you're going to do really is just memorize that Eimi chart. If you're confused about verbs and their differences from nouns, don't worry about that yet. We'll have a whole introduction on verbs. But just some basics of the verb. Like nouns, there's two main parts of the Greek verb. So the first part is the stem, the same as a noun, right? There's a stem, and then there's an ending. Okay, so the stem carries the meaning of the verb, and then those personal endings attached to the end of the verb, they're going to tell you two things about this verb. And those two things are the person and the number. Okay, so again, nouns are a little bit different, but here with verbs, you simply are talking about the person and the number of the verb. Of course, there's more, but this is just the basics. Okay, so verbs can refer to three different persons, and each person is associated with a personal pronoun, and I believe this is in your vocab, so you guys should have memorized this. So the first person personal pronoun is ego, and the second person is su, and then we know the third person is autos. We've memorized that. Each person can either be singular or they can be plural, and we use different pronouns for verbs that are plural. So I don't think we've gotten to this, but yeah, those plural pronouns. So ego becomes emes, su becomes humes, and autos becomes hoi. And we're familiar with autos, all right? Verbs are always going to agree with their subjects in person and number. So again, you have agreement with their subject. And in Greek, since the verb itself contains the person and the number that we're referring to, there's no need to write out personal pronoun in front of verb. So English is very different. You need those personal pronouns. So for example, for a sentence, you write would just look like this, right? You write, and you have to have you. You can't just say write. But in Greek, you don't need this. Okay? Sugraphes. Okay, sugraphes, that's your example here. This is their personal pronoun, right? Second person. You write. But here, this ending actually tells you that it's second person. Okay, second person singular. So you don't need this. And a lot of times in Greek sentences, you're not going to have this personal pronoun here. You're just going to have the verb. And this verb contains, again, this data. Does that make sense? All right. So let's look now at the Eimi chart. And basically, you're just going to memorize this. Don't worry too much about verbs and how to construct verbs and the meaning of verbs. Just memorize the forms of Eimi here. You have first singular, which is Eimi, and that simply means I am. Second singular is a, means you are. You have third singular, which is estin, which is he, she, it is. First person plural is esmin, which is we are. Second plural is este, you are. And finally, third plural is asin, that means they are. Okay, so just memorize those forms of Eimi for now, and we'll get to verbs down the road. You have a couple additional notes. I'm not going to go over all of these. Yeah, if you just memorize the forms of Eimi, you're good. You can just memorize the forms of Eimi on this chart. That's pretty much all you need to know. And the past tense form of Eimi, it's in your notes, but it's just aim. So Ada knew. Okay, that's the past tense. So memorize this as well. It's the past tense form of estin, which is third person singular. Okay, so aim. Oh, and there's of course those accents on top of the Ada. But just memorize that along with the forms of Eimi. Okay. I want to go on now to explain the predicate nominative in the time that we have left. And this is actually very important to understand. So predicate nominative is any noun that describes or adds more detailed information about the subject of the sentence. So work off of that example that we have in your notes. Okay? Just an English example. God, let's do it like this. God is Lord. God is Lord, okay? So notice, here's a sentence. What's the subject? God. Okay, God's the subject. Okay, S, subject. And then what's your verb? Is. The verb is. Okay. Now what's Lord?
Object.
Is it an object? Right. Well, what it is really, the technical term is it's the predicate nominative. Okay. So do you guys remember what a predicate is? Anyone? Yeah, it's the verb with whatever else. So right here, this whole thing right here, this is your predicate nominative, right? Is Lord is your predicate nominative. Of course, is Lord. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is a predicate. I mean, this is the whole predicate. Okay. And the predicate is simply telling you something about the subject. Okay, so the verb and everything else that's coming after the verb, that's your predicate. Now the predicate nominative, the reason why it's called the predicate nominative is because this word right here, this is another noun, right? So you have two nouns now. You have a subject, and you have this verb which is describing, it's telling you something about this noun, right? It's giving you more information about God, and it's the fact that He's Lord, right? This is going to be, in Greek, as we're going to see, this is going to be in the nominative case. Okay, not the accusative case. Does that make sense? All right. So let me see what I have in your notes here. I say, nouns following Eimi are predicate nominatives. They don't receive the action of the verb. Okay. They simply tell you something about the subject and they're descriptive. These nouns will also take on the nominative case. So I have that example here in Greek. So why don't we work through that Greek example? We'll run through this rather quickly. Maybe I'll write it out the same way for you guys to see. Let's see how chaos. Oops. Okay. And is kurios Lord. Okay. So again, let's do the same thing. All right, just so you guys see it in Greek. What's the subject? God. Say it in Greek. Theos is your subject. What's the verb? Estin is your verb. Okay. What would be your predicate? What's the whole predicate? Estin kurios. So let's box this. That's your predicate, right? It's telling you something about theos, hatheos. And what is it telling you? Well, it's telling you that He's kurios, or He's Lord. And this is your predicate nominative. This right here is your predicate nominative. And so that's why, notice here, what is this? Omicron sigma. What case is that? Or parse this. Nominative, singular, masculine. Exactly. Thank you. So, nominative, singular, masculine. Okay. And it's interesting because, again, you have this sentence, and normally you would have a verb, and the object would usually take an accusative, but this is not that. This is a predicate nominative. So this is also, what is this? Nominative, singular, masculine. Right? They're both nominative, singular, masculine. Right? They're both, in a sense, they're both talking about the subject. Right? They're both subjects here in this sentence, in a sense. Okay. Does that make sense for predicate nominatives? So whenever you have Eimi, the verb Eimi, this to be verb, it's going to take a predicate nominative. Now, let me just explain one more thing, and we'll be done. Let's erase this sentence. Let's say your sentence is kurios estin hatheos. Is this correct? What does this mean?
Lord is God.
Okay, so yeah, when you're reading it from left to right, it means the Lord is God, but it could mean God is Lord. Okay? And so let's look at your notes now. Look at some, let's see, how do we determine, if you look at that last bullet point, how do we determine which noun is the subject and which is the predicate nominative? Because that's the question, right? You have two nominatives in a sentence, and you have this verb, this to be verb, and you're like, okay, Greek can go either way, right? How do you determine which one's the subject, which one's the predicate nominative, which one do you put after, okay, which one do you put before? First and foremost, just context. You have to read the context, look at the sentence before, look at the sentence after, figure out what's going on in the paragraph. Okay, so context is going to help you. But there are some general rules of thumb. And again, I don't think this is always true. But again, just try to follow this order. And this is in Mounts. He says if the word is a pronoun, okay, probably the subject. All right, so if you have autos or ego or whatever it is, these pronouns, probably the subject. If you have an articular noun or a proper name, that's also probably the subject. So in this case, what is probably the subject? Theos. Why is that? Proper name, or actually in this case, it's not a proper name. Theos is just a noun, but what's preceding theos? Alright, so probably this is the subject. Okay?
Because it's right in front of.
No, not because it's well, because of the article. This is one, you're seeing this as one word, right? Theos.
Right.
Alright. So it's taking the definite article, and so this is probably the subject.
Okay.
Okay. If there's no pronoun. Because if there's a pronoun, that kind of takes precedence. And then finally, if there's a pronoun and also an articular noun or proper name, the pronoun is probably the subject. So again, that pronoun takes precedence.
Right, that makes sense.
And then the article. Okay?
If you have he in a sentence,
Yeah.
it's usually the subject of the sentence.
Yeah, exactly. He is God, right? So if you look at, just turn to page 3 real quickly. I believe we have some of these here. Just that first one, you have that demonstrative, right? Hutas estin hakuias tu thetu. And if you guys see here, that demonstrative pronoun, that would be the subject of this predicate nominative. So that would mean this is the Son of God. That next example is pretty complicated, so I'm not going to go through that, but maybe what I'll have you guys do is, why don't you do that next example, which is blank, do that for homework, and see how you guys do with the predicate nominative. So any questions about the predicate nominative before we wrap up? I know we went through it kind of quickly at the end of class, but any questions? Good? All right, guys, let me pray for us, and we'll be dismissed. All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you again for this class. Thank you for this time to prepare us now to worship you. We want to see Christ and worship Him, and just see Him for all that He is for us. That He is Lord. He is God. He is love. And so let us enjoy Him now as we worship. Just bless all of us, all of these students as we go. Again, give us wisdom and discernment, and help us to grasp all of these concepts so we can better understand your word and worship your Son. And so bless us now as we go. Okay, this in the name of your Son Jesus. Amen. All right, thanks everyone.